In a London warehouse, workers in protective gear move methodically between rows of pristine trench coats, still in their plastic wrapping. They are not packaging them for shipment. They are stacking them for incineration. That night in 2018, Burberry set fire to $37 million of brand new, flawless merchandise. Coats, handbags, scarves, perfume bottles, and watched it all turn to ash. Not damaged stock, not factory seconds, perfect goods destroyed on purpose. Over the previous 5 years, the company had incinerated over $118 million of its own products. The hashtag Burberry exploded across social media. The public demanded answers. The answer, stripped down to its economic core, was 5 words. Accessibility kills a luxury brand. Walk into any economics classroom in the world. A professor draws a simple downward curve on a chalkboard. Price goes up, demand goes down. It is the first law of markets, so fundamental it barely needs explaining. But there is an entire category of goods where this law does not just weaken, it flips completely. A Rolex watch sits under glass in a Fifth Avenue boutique. It tells time no more accurately than a $20 Casio from a drugstore shelf. Yet the waiting list stretches 18 months. A Hermès Birkin bag rests in tissue paper inside a cream-colored box. It carries belongings no more efficiently than a canvas tote from a supermarket. The starting price is $10,000, and you cannot simply walk in and buy one. A bottle of Dom Perignon chills in a silver ice bucket at a Monaco restaurant. It hydrates no better than tap water. The table ordered 4 of them. These are Veblen goods, named after the American economist Thorstein Veblen, who first described this paradox in 1899. The more expensive they become, the more people want them. Not despite the price, because of it. Veblen was born in 1857 to Norwegian immigrant parents on a Wisconsin farm, far from the gilded dining rooms of New York and Newport. He drifted through universities his entire life, perpetually underpaid, poorly dressed, an outsider looking in at the wealthy circles of America's industrial age. Carnegie's mansion loomed over Fifth Avenue. Vanderbilt's summer cottage in Newport had 70 rooms. Rockefeller's dinner parties featured orchestras and guest lists that took months to arrange. But Veblen did not see glamour. He saw a behavioral pattern with the cold clarity of an anthropologist studying a foreign tribe. The wealthy were not buying things. They were broadcasting a signal. Every silver fork on the table, every chandelier in an unused parlor, every yard of imported silk on a wife who never performed physical labor. It all said one thing loudly to everyone who could see it. I have more resources than you. Veblen called this conspicuous consumption, and he argued it was not a quirk of the Gilded Age, it was a fundamental feature of how humans organize themselves. We are primates. Primates form dominance hierarchies. In the jungle, status is announced through physical size, bright plumage, elaborate displays. In human civilization, the display vehicle changed. The signal did not. A peacock grows an enormous tail, metabolically expensive, structurally inconvenient, a liability when predators are near. The tail is a handicap. That is precisely the point. The peacock broadcasts, I am so genetically superior that I can afford this absurd waste and still survive. Evolutionary psychologists have mapped the same logic onto human consumption. Men primed with mating-related thoughts in laboratory studies became significantly more willing to desire conspicuous, expensive goods. The instinct to signal is not metaphorical. It is biological, encoded across millions of years of social competition. Now consider how this plays out across a modern city on a Saturday afternoon. In a Mayfair boutique, a hedge fund manager examines a limited edition timepiece. The price makes it inaccessible to most of the people who will see it on his wrist, and that inaccessibility is the entire value proposition. 3 neighborhoods away, in a shopping center, a mid-level manager buys a premium brand wallet, not because the leather is superior, but because the logo positions him a rung above where he started. In a suburban mall, a university student stretches her budget for branded trainers she cannot really afford, because in her social world, the right logo is the price of admission. At a street market, a teenager handles a counterfeit designer belt, contemplating the purchase. The belt is fake. The social need it serves is completely real. Veblen called this cascading pattern pecuniary emulation. Each class imitates the consumption of the class immediately above it. Every layer is playing the same game, only the price points differ. This dynamic explains something that initially puzzles economists. Why do lower-income consumers sometimes spend a disproportionate share of their earnings on status goods? A family living paycheck to paycheck buys name-brand shoes for their child's first day of school. A young man working minimum wage saves months to afford a designer jacket. The math looks irrational. The sociology does not. When you stand near the bottom of an economic hierarchy, the cost of being perceived as low status is highest. Banks charge you higher fees. Employers make faster negative assumptions about your competence. Landlords look past you. Service is slower, colder, less attentive. A visible display of wealth partially offsets those penalties. It is not irrational to buy status when your social survival depends on how others read you at a glance. But in 1899, Veblen could not have imagined the mechanism that would supercharge his theory beyond anything he described. A teenager in Sao Paulo opens Instagram and photographs her meal at a restaurant she can barely afford, angling the frame for the best light. A travel influencer in Dubai stages a poolside shot, sunglasses, a branded bag placed just so, the skyline behind her, and posts it to 400,000 followers before the shutter clicks twice. A London banker photographs his new watch, face down on a conference table, letting the strap logo speak for itself, then slides the phone back into his pocket. Before Instagram, conspicuous consumption was local. Your car impressed the neighbors. Your coat signaled status to the 50 people at a dinner party. The audience was small. Social media turned every human being on Earth into a global broadcaster. The audience for a status signal went from dozens to millions. And when the audience grows, the pressure to signal intensifies exponentially. Research has consistently found that heavy social media use correlates with more materialistic attitudes and higher rates of conspicuous spending, particularly among younger users. The platforms are not neutral pipes. Their algorithms reward displays of luxury and wealth with engagement, likes, comments, shares, which creates an incentive structure that continuously drives more conspicuous behavior. And the luxury brands understood this shift immediately. They stopped selling products and started selling content. A Parisian fashion house flies 20 influencers to a private event in Tuscany, not to sell tickets, but to generate 100,000 social posts. The influencer's entire economic model is conspicuous consumption, being paid to display expensive things to millions of aspirational followers. Veblen's theory, written in 1899 about men with top hats and manicured lawns, is now the operating manual for a trillion-dollar global industry. So what does rational behavior look like inside this system? Classical economists would say none of this is rational. Consumers are paying enormous premiums for products with no functional advantage over far cheaper alternatives. But Veblen's insight was that this analysis misses the point entirely. These consumers are maximizing utility. They are simply maximizing a different kind of utility. The utility they are purchasing is social position. In a world where your position in the hierarchy shapes your access to professional networks, romantic partners, respect, and opportunity, a visible display of economic power is not irrational. It is strategic. The Hermes bag secures the table reservation. The right car in the right neighborhood signals to other wealthy people that you belong. The logo on the shirt opens the conversation. The signal has a real return. The price is the product, and the product delivers. Hermes has understood this for decades. A Birkin bag does not just have a high price, it has a system designed to make the price feel insufficient on its own. First, you cannot walk in and buy one. You must establish a purchase history, spending thousands of dollars on other Hermes products to prove your commitment to the brand. Then, if the store decides you qualify, you may be offered the opportunity to purchase a Birkin. You do not choose the bag chooses you. The waiting lists, the velvet rope prerequisites, the engineered scarcity, all of it amplifies desire by signaling that even money alone is not enough. You need the right social credentials. The result is a leather good that has consistently outperformed the stock market over time. People buy Birkins not just as status symbols, but as financial instruments, assets that appreciate precisely because they remain scarce. The moment Hermes flooded the market, the signal would collapse. The bag would become just a bag. This is exactly why Burberry burned its inventory, not from contempt for consumers, from the cold economic logic of status markets. Accessibility is the enemy of luxury, and the enemy must be destroyed. Now, here is where the story takes its strangest turn. When conspicuous consumption becomes universal, when every aspirational consumer carries the same logo, posts the same vacation, wears the same branded sneaker, the signal loses its power. If everyone broadcasts the same status symbol, it no longer differentiates anyone. And so a new, more sophisticated layer of signaling emerges. A founder in San Francisco walks into a board meeting in a plain gray t-shirt made from Loro Piana cashmere. It costs $800. There is no logo anywhere on it. A private equity partner in London drives to work in a 10-year-old Volvo. She has a house in Notting Hill and a chalet in Verbier. She has not worn a visible logo since her 20s. An old money family in Paris furnishes their apartment with faded inherited pieces rather than sleek new luxury goods. Every item in the room is older than their youngest grandchild. Researchers call this counter-signaling. When the lower tiers have learned to imitate a signal, the upper tier abandons it and inverts the code. The fashion industry calls it quiet luxury. Brands like Brunello Cucinelli and Loro Piana, no logos, extraordinary materials, prices that require no announcement, have exploded among ultra-high net worth consumers precisely because the masses cannot read them. The signal has been encrypted. Only those with sufficient wealth and cultural knowledge can decode it. This creates yet another rung on the ladder. Because now you are not just buying a product, you are buying knowledge. The cultural fluency to know which products carry meaning to the people whose opinion actually matters to you. That cultural capital is even harder to counterfeit than a handbag. You cannot fake it with a good replica. You have to actually inhabit the world. Veblen glimpsed this in 1899. He wrote that the most refined expression of wealth is not displaying what you have spent, but effortlessly demonstrating what you know. The game never ends. it only becomes more elaborate. The next time you feel drawn to something expensive, not because it functions better, but because it costs more, pause for a moment. Recognize what is actually happening. Your brain is running ancient primate software, repurposed by a trillion-dollar industry that has spent decades studying your evolutionary psychology with more precision than most people study anything. You are not buying a watch. You are purchasing a position in a dominance hierarchy. You are not buying a handbag. You are buying visibility in a social network your ancestors would not recognize. This is not a moral judgment. Veblen himself was not a moralist. He was a diagnostician. He did not say conspicuous consumption was wrong. He said it was inevitable. A predictable output of a species that organizes into hierarchies and uses material display to negotiate position within them. Understanding it does not stop it, but it does change what you see when you look at it. And somewhere, in a record that no longer shows as a line item in any annual report, $37 million of brand new trench coats became smoke and particulate matter over a British industrial estate. Sacrificed, deliberately and rationally, on the logic that Thorstein Veblen laid out in a book published the same year the first automobile crossed a city street. In the economics of status, the most valuable thing a luxury brand can do with its product is ensure that most people can never have it, even if ensuring that means watching it burn.